Welcome to another Top 5 with Kris O Five. Today we'll be looking at 5 of the best performing decks in the new season. The meta is looking pretty solid right now, so if you're looking for a deck that will stick around for a while, then you've come to the right place. As always, I will give you an overview of each deck, its win rates, a mulligan guide for it, and if it's worth crafting it, so stick around to the end. We have reached 7,000 subscribers on the channel, and that's pretty amazing. Thank you all for showing your support to the channel and to what I do. Now, let's get into it. I already sound like a dead inside news anchor, so I decided to dress as one for this top 5. Like I said, the meta is pretty stable right now, and even my top 5 from 2 weeks ago is still pretty much on point. Variations of Eggrage Warrior, Tempo Demon Hunter, Galakrond Rogue, and Highlander Hunter are still pretty much on top. But now, let's see 5 other decks or variations of the decks I mentioned last time with which you can climb some ranks. Okay, so the first deck on my list has to be the one I used to climb to Legend with pretty easily this month. Secret Stealth Galakrond Rogue. Galakrond Rogue has been an archetype for quite a while now, and it's pretty solid, but the secret package seems to be doing best in it. It has a lot of ways to cheat out wins, and the secrets in Hanar fit perfectly into the Galakrond archetype. The 2 Spy Mistresses do a wonderful job at securing the early board, and most of the time you don't even want to be attacking face with them, but just keep them stealth so you have answers for your opponent's early threats. It's a very good way for you to transition from your early game to your Galakrond game plan. It's a very tempo-oriented deck, which wins by out-tempoing your opponent. You just keep on sticking minions on the board while removing your opponent's minions. The games tend to last longer than what you would be expecting from a rogue deck, since the deck is really packed with a lot of value cards. You can go toe-to-toe with pretty much any deck, ranging from fast demon hunters to slow Galakrond Priests. You just have to pick the right game plan for each opponent, and your win rates will skyrocket. When playing against faster decks, you shouldn't really be afraid of playing Hanar or even Miscreant without getting the value from them. Using Shadow Steps even for lackeys would be a good idea for you, just so you can hold off their aggression. When facing mages and priests, you go for value on the other hand, even though sometimes you will be able to close out the game before turn 10. You have to be careful how you use your Togwaggle against slow decks too, since you don't want to be fatiguing yourself. If there are not that many great cards left in your deck, you might even consider picking Xerax's Crown over the Wand, especially if you haven't used your Galakrond yet, which will bring you even closer to fatigue. Saving Shadow Step for Krunks and Togwaggle here is a lot more important. The matchups look something like this. The results will be a lot greener if you put enough time into learning this deck. Warriors are not too easy, but they're definitely not unbeatable. Warlocks should not be too big of a problem for you as well. Druids tend to be annoying, and so do face hunters. You will have a good time against priests if you know what you're doing, so there's that. For the mulligan, I guess it would be better to separate it for against value decks and for against fast decks. For the fast decks, you always want to get a good 1-drop like your Spy Mistress or your Cat. You would love to get some removal for their early game aggression, and you would need your Hanar and a secret to go with it too. Usually, Ambush would be the best secret you can play against those decks early on, since it's a free drop for 2 mana. When you're going second, keeping Miscreant and Eddy can also be pretty good for you, especially if you know that your opponent cannot handle a big Eddy on turn 2 or 3. If you already have a 1-drop, keeping Praise Galakrond is also pretty good. When you're facing value decks, you can even keep Togwaggle. You need to think what you can be expecting from your opponent and mulligan accordingly. Keeping Hanar against a priest, for instance, wouldn't be such a great idea, since they can deal with it pretty easily on turn 2. The Galakrond archetype is definitely pretty solid, and it's worth the craft. It will be in standard for another whole year, and I do believe it will remain at the top of the meta for the rest of its lifetime, as long as it doesn't get nerfed to the ground. There were some rumors that the Galakrond cards and the Togwaggle cards will cost 1 mana instead of 0, but those are just rumors for now. Edwin was at the top of everyone's half list, but since that didn't happen, I guess a nerf is quite plausible instead. Either way, Blizzard did say that we're not supposed to be seeing nerfs for quite a while now, but I'm not too sure about that. It seems like Eggrage Warrior and Tempo Demon Hunter are doing a bit too good right now, so I would definitely expect those 2 to get nerfed somewhere near in the future. Next up, let's talk about a deck that a lot of people hate playing against. I'm not saying it's the best deck right now, but it did gain a lot of popularity, so you better get familiar with what you can expect from it, so you have better odds of coming out ahead. I'm talking about Galakrond Priest. A lot of people are having fun with this deck right now, and it's packing a lot of value. It's packing a lot of the new cards in it as well, and it feels very fresh and fun to play with. The fact that you can discover a ton of cards or steal them from your opponent is also pretty cool, and it makes it all that more fun, but a lot more harder to pilot optimally as well. The deck actually kinda feels like Galakrond Rogue too, because it has a lot of tempo in it as well, and you can find yourself swarmed by this deck early on a lot more often nowadays. The new Veilweaver and Artificer are a great example of minions that can pose a big threat to your opponents early on, and not only. Apotheosis on either of those can be a pretty huge minion for you to deal with pretty much any deck. Madame Lazul is another example of a very huge value generator, because she can even discover your opponent's fully invoked Galakrond, even if you haven't invoked once yourself. She even reveals pretty much half of your opponent's hand, so she can be pretty useful. Thoughtsteal also offers some pretty nutty interactions with cards from different classes, but it's kinda hit and miss with that one, because you can end up getting cluttered with cards you can't really be using. The deck is really packed with so many great cards like Morozond, Soul Mirror, Mind Flayer, and so many Discover cards that pretty much guarantee that no game will feel the same as the other one. If you can find room for one Plague of deck in this deck, that can be great for you, but even if you don't, you will probably be able to discover one during the game, so you should be fine. The reason why the deck rose in popularity throughout the last week is the sudden rise of all of the Enraged Warriors. Priest is handling them pretty well, but Galakrond Rogue will be a problem for it. Hunters are also pretty good against it, and even Demon Hunters are holding their own. But overall, the deck is doing pretty well on skilled hands, and this chart will look a lot greener there. For the Mulligan, you will be looking for your board clears and single target removals when you're facing faster decks. Keeping your Artificer and Veil is also pretty good. Disciple is also not that bad. You just need to be thinking about what you will be needing against your opponent, and you should try and look for that. For the slower matchups, you will be looking for your value cards with Galakrond at the top, so you can get the most value out of his hero power. Even keeping Krunks so you can draw Galakrond as soon as you can is not a bad idea here. Fate Weaver is also not a bad keep, so you can get a discount on those high value cards. Overall, the deck is doing pretty good right now, so if you feel like playing Priest, now would be a good time. It's not a cheap deck, and there are quite a few niche legendaries in there as well, but it's a great deck with which you can climb steady, and you can also use it in tournaments too. As long as you're okay with slow games, this deck should be good for you. I haven't talked about Highlander Mage in a while, so here it is again. This is another high value slow deck with which you can do wonders as long as you take the time to learn it. When Albatross is nerfed, the deck really flourishes. The Highlander archetype really fits Mage well, since you have so many great cards, and that Reno on 6 is too much to handle for most. The deck curves out pretty consistently nowadays, and it has some decent early game too. Gone are the days where you ping till turn 4. Dropping the new Mage Prime minion on turn 2 feels pretty good, but it feels even greater dropping its Prime on turn 7. It's usually enough to clear your opponent's board and stick some face damage too, but there will be the occasional Christmas tree as well. The new Imprisoned Observer is a pretty good card with which you can deal with the early game aggression. Throwing Zephy on 2 for the ramp is usually what you want to be doing as long as your opponent allows it. Around turn 6 is where things really start to pop off. You can swing the board with a Reno, or you can swing the entire game with a Dragoncaster with a puzzle box. The box seems to be favoring the mage a lot more often nowadays, but you will be having the occasional flops with it too, so think about if you really want to be playing that box when you're already ahead on the board. On turn 10, the amazing Reno does a great job of clearing whatever board your opponent might be having, but consider baiting your opponent into developing even further on the board before dropping that Reno bomb. The RNG hero power will be either useless or valuable for you most of the time, but you will be having the occasional burns from it too. The matchups are pretty good for you as long as you're not seeing too many hunters, which include demon hunters too. Bomb Warrior is also pretty bad for you, but we don't really see too many of those nowadays. Other than that, the matchups look green all across. For the Mulligan, Reno and Zephyrus always make the cut. For the faster decks, you will want your early game answers like Doomsayer, Arcane Breath, and Mana Saber. Bone Wraith and Cartoon Defender are also not too bad, as long as you can reach those turns. Arcane Intellect also makes some sense, so you have a better chance of drawing what you need in time. For the value matchups, you want your Solarian, Dragoncaster, and the amazing Reno too. Mana Saber helps you curve out nicely as well, and even Dragon Queen Alex can be a keep. This again is a very expensive deck, but it definitely has the results to back it up. It has a bit too much RNG involved into it, but most of the time it will be favoring you. It's not a fast deck, but it can give you consistent results when you know what you're doing with it, and again, you can bring it to tournaments, so the choice is yours. Now, let's see one of the best performing Enraged Warriors, the Eggrage Warrior. As most of you know, the main reason why Enraged Warrior got so popular nowadays is because it demolishes demon hunters, and it's pretty good against rogues too. It's quite the complicated deck though, and you can go for a lot of strategies and combos with it. The damaging your own minions aspect of the deck can give you a ton of card draw, good amount of armor, or cheated out minions, and if your opponent doesn't react in time, he can get punished by it a lot. The new Wormhole Challengers and the Blood Boil Brutes are the two main reasons why the deck is doing so well in the current meta. Playing the Challenger even on an empty board feels great, but it can also deal pretty well with what your opponent might be playing against you, and you will be left with a minion too. The Cache is another great card that enables this deck. Throwing it on 2 is pretty great, and you can equip a buffed up weapon on turn 3 with which you can start generating value right away. You're mostly a combo deck, so gathering your combo pieces as soon as you can is pretty good for you. It comes to no one's surprise that priests and big druids will be hard for you. Highlander mages are not that easy for you as well, but other than that, any other popular deck should be in your favor. Demon Hunters almost feel like a 100% win rate matchup, and a lot of the other popular matchups are quite favorable too. So if you really master this deck, you will be flying through the ranks. For the Mulligan, the best cards you can be getting is the Challenger and the Cache. Ankar is also a pretty solid keep for you, especially if you didn't get the Cache, and keeping the Egg is also pretty nice for tier 2. In faster matchups, keeping the Sky Raider is also a good idea, and you can even be keeping Lance if you didn't get the Cache or Ankar. Try not to get baited by Risky Skipper and Mercenary, because those two usually are not a great idea to keep. It sounds good on paper, but you won't be able to play them the way you thought you would, and you will end up holding them for too long, or they will just get wiped as soon as you drop them. All in all, the deck is definitely worth checking out, because it's probably the best one in the current meta. You will have a lot to learn with it, and it feels great when it pops off, but you will be having quite a few awkward games with it too. Possible nerfs might hit it sooner than later, but that's the price we pay for playing top meta decks. And the last deck on the list has to be Tempo Demon Hunter again. This deck is still stealing wins like there's no tomorrow, and even after the whole meta tried to shift against it, it keeps on being the top winning class all around. After the Egg Invasion, the best Tempo Demon Hunter is the one that doesn't run Furies in it. A lot of people started taking Beaming sidekicks in, so they have better mirror matchups and better Egg Warrior matchups, and the Frozen Shadow Weavers help out a lot too. We can all agree that the Fury is a broken card, but with all those warriors out there, it doesn't really make sense to put it in anymore. It punishes you if you play it against an Armorsmith or a Bomb Wrangler or just a white board. Not much else to say about it. It's still very strong, it still sticks damage no matter what, and it's still pretty cheap. Not too much stats for this particular version, but you get the picture. Anything but Warrior is great. If we get a similar version with Fell Wings instead of sidekicks, the situation remains the same. As long as it's not Warrior, you should be good, especially if you're going first. For the Mulligan, you want your good 1-drops, your Umber Wing, and Twin Slice maybe. If you already have a good curve going, Satire is a good keep too. When going second against a slower deck, keeping Skull is also not bad, but other than that, keeping anything above 3 mana can rarely be justified. You can't really go wrong with crafting Demon Hunter. It proved to be unnerfable, and even if they hit it again, which is kind of expected, I think it will still remain at the top or pretty close to it. It just has tools for every scenario, and it feels like there's nothing you can do about it if they curve out properly. Other than that, there are quite a few good decks out there as well. There are so many good Hunter decks, this card Zulok is doing pretty good, Spell Druid is killing it, and not to mention, there are a ton of variations of all of those decks. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this video guys, hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you know where the like and subscribe buttons are. Thanks for watching, I'm Kris O Five, and I'll see you in my next video or stream.